Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Little Woman podcast. I am Niina, your host, and today's comment shout out goes to one of my favorite Little Woman bloggers, Princess Arisa. I think a lot of the bad commentary about Little Woman comes from people who want to view each of the March sisters as symbols rather than fleshed out human beings. We see these reductive views again and again in books and online. Jo, they say, represents unconventionality and gender nonconformity. Meg represents traditional domestic femininity. Amy represents the elegant society. And Beth, well, they disagree, but most often they say that she is either a symbol of a perfect goodness, a model for her more flawed sisters to aspire toward, but too good for this earth, of childhood, which is why she, quote, never grows up and has to die when her sisters reach adulthood, or of the angel in the house archetype, and therefore, quote, has to die because that stifling and anti-feminist archetype has to die. Here's my personal view. None of the above is true. The March sisters aren't symbols. They are human beings. Louisa May Alcott based them on herself and her own three sisters, who were obviously three-dimensional human beings. The same is true for their fictional counterparts. They all have dimensions, and none of them fit into those neat little boxes. End quote. I see this often in Little Woman discussions, and I admit that I have done it myself in the past, putting characters into narrow categories. This is also why I enjoy researching Louisa May Alcott. Her characters are based on real people, and they are much more than just one-dimensional labels. For example, many people view Beth as a perfect, angelic character. However, in the book, Beth struggles with her shyness and social anxiety, which I can relate to from my own teenage years. I believe that those challenges are not signs of perfection. Another point is that she loses her pet bird because she overfeeds it. Again, not something that a perfect character would do. This tendency to simplify well-known literary characters is quite common. My favorite characters tend to be those who are not perfect and who make mistakes, learning from them in the process. I find those to be the most inspirational. Tiffany and I continue our discussion about Camp Lawrence and 19th century fashion. If you would like to follow Tiffany on Instagram, her handle is Stitching Addiction, where she showcases beautiful Little Woman inspired clothing. You can also follow me at Podcasting Little Woman. This is the Little Woman podcast, dressing the March sisters, 19th century fashion in Little Woman. Enjoy. What do you think about Sally's French gloves?
I don't know, other than the fact that, being French, they would have been the cutting edge of fashion, how that would have differed from, say, Meg's cotton gloves. One more way of setting up that contrast between wealth and ability to get whatever she wanted and Meg having to pinch her pennies.
They were really into all things French back then. In the Vanity Fair, they speak about Sally's French dress.
The more details they have on them like that, obviously, they were more expensive.
Well, I would imagine Meg could do embroidery herself. She's so talented that way. We know that Jo is good at knitting and sewing.
Right.
Like they all have these very good skills when it comes to handcraft. And I always thought it was really cute in the second part when Jo is mending Frederick's socks. No. I always thought that was cute. I mean, he could mend his own socks as well, but Jo just wanted to be noticed by him.
Right. I always Joe's the dressmaker to the family in chapter 29. And Amy's like, let's go pay calls. And Joe's like, I don't want to pay calls. She wants to sit there and work on making dresses.
Yes. If Jo is the dressmaker, then Amy is like an accessory person, because in the chapter Clause, she basically dresses up Jo. She tries different scarves on her and different hats. And it's nice how they all have these very, very different fashionable tastes.
Yes. I mean, you see that again with Amy when she's in Italy, when Laurie and her are at that Christmas ball at the hotel.
Oh, yeah.
She has that old white gown that she got from somebody. I don't remember. It says who gave it to her. But she dresses it up, right? She puts the basically it's tulle over it, and she, does the stuff with her hair and all of those different things. She's also the one that paints her boots. I think it's blue.
Oh, I remember
blue
that.
so that she can match her outfit. So yeah, she's definitely an accessories person.
Very resourceful. I like that about Amy. She sort of learns to cope with her poverty that way. She recycles things.
Yeah, her and Meg both cared about fashion, but I think Amy was, I agree, much better at being resourceful to create the look that she wanted and still look like she was in fashion without the money.
Like in modern day, she could be a fashion designer.
I mean, I guess that fits in with her being the artist, right?
Absolutely.
Well, I think truth is a very silly play. Let's have a sensible game of authors to refresh our mind, proposed Jo. Ned, Frank, and the little girls joined in this, and while it went on, the three elders sat apart, talking. Miss Kate took out her sketch again, and Margaret watched her, while Mr. Brooke lay on the grass with a book, which he did not read. How beautifully you do it. I wish I could draw, said Meg with mingled admiration and regret in her voice. Why don't you learn? I should think you had taste and talent for it, replied Miss Kate graciously. I haven't time. Your mamma prefers other accomplishments, I fancy. So did mine, but I proved to her that I had talent by taking a few lessons privately, and then she was quite willing I should go on. Can't you do the same with your governess? I have none. I forgot. Young ladies in America go to school more than with us. Very fine schools they are, too, Papa says. You go to a private one, I suppose. I don't go at all. I'm a governess myself. Oh, indeed, said Miss Kate. But she might as well have said, dear me, how dreadful. Her tone implied it, and something in her face made Ned color and wish she had not been so frank. Mr. Brooke looked up and said quickly, young ladies in America love independence as much as their ancestors did, and are admired and respected for supporting themselves. Oh yes, of course, it's very nice and proper in them to do so. We have many most respectable and worthy young women who do the same and are employed by the nobility, because being the daughters of gentlemen, they are both well-bred and accomplished, said Miss Kate in a patronizing tone that hurt Meg's pride and made her work seem not only more distasteful, but degrading. Did the German song suit Miss March? Inquired Mr. Brooke, breaking an awkward pause. Oh, yes, it was very sweet, and I'm much obliged to whoever translated it for me, said, and Meg's downcast. Oh, yes, it was very sweet, and I'm much obliged to whoever translated it for me, and Meg's downcast face brightened as she spoke. I think it's amusing how Alcott also kind of sets up the British versus American contrast in this chapter, because you see it again here, and it's not the first time.
No.
It's alluded to, with Ned versus Jo and the croquet game. It's alluded to with the Spirit of 76, which is the American Revolution. And of course, that was less than 100 years before this is occurring. So, it was their, I guess, probably grandparents that would have been alive during the American Revolution. So it's still very fresh in the memory, I guess, that rivalry.
Oh, yeah. I spoke with one of my guests about this, that the Vaughan family, they probably come from old money. And then the Lawrences, they are like new money. Because I think they mentioned that the older Mr. Lawrence, that he owns like ships and he trades. Laurie joins the family business later on. But Laurie is born into a rich family. But I get the sense that not necessarily older Mr. Lawrence. Maybe he started from scratch. Who knows? But the Vaughans might be related to, I don't know, British royalty. Did live in the UK for a while. There is less class differences, but it still exists in some extent there. We can see that in Little Woman in the way some of the characters behave.
Right. Yeah, that difference in class. And of course, the old money versus new money is always a trope that authors love to set up as well.
Yes.
To show that difference. Got that in Titanic, the old money versus the new money.
Oh, yeah.
That in Pride and Prejudice, you've got the Bingleys are new money, and then Darcy is old money.
I just keep thinking like Tom Gannon's from Man of Green Gables. They were old money.
Yes.
Yeah, that is true. 19th century children's books. It really comes out a lot. I recently read Secret Garden from Hudson Burnett.
Yep.
That was also like old money versus new money. It was very prevalent to people around the time.
Definitely something that figured in a lot more than it does now.
Maybe it was something that Louisa May Alcott experienced a lot because she was a lot more poor than the March family. Like, the Alcotts were very poor. And then she basically went from one social class to another because she became a billionaire. So she probably saw all kinds of characters during her life.
Oh, absolutely.
Always makes me a little mad when people complain about Meg's character, that she's not ambitious or something like that, because she did work as a governess, and she did have like interest in acting and had lots of interest besides, starting a family, which is an important thing as well for her. But like Jo also worked as a governess, and I think there's even a moment when Jo is in New York where she says that being a governess is as good as a job as anything else. That she's going to be proud of being a governess.
To be ashamed of.
Yeah. When she's in the boarding house, there are like people who look down upon her because she's a governess.
Right.
There was some kind of stigma related to that. But in general, I think maybe it was because you were basically a working girl when you were a governess. You weren't really expected to work if you were a woman.
Meg is, ashamed of it here.
That's one of the things that she and Joan has in common because they both work as teachers. Don't you read German? Asked Miss Kate with a look of surprise. Not very well. My father, who taught me, is away, and I don't get on very fast alone, for I'm no one to correct my pronunciation. Try a little now. Here is Schiller's Mary Stuart, and a tutor who loves to teach. And Mr. Brooke laid his book on her lap, with an inviting smile. It is so hard, I'm afraid, to try, said Meg, grateful, but bashful in the presence of the accomplished young lady beside her. I will read a bit to encourage you, and Miss Kate read one of the most beautiful passages, in a perfectly correct but perfectly expressionless manner. Mr. Brooke made no comment as she returned the book to Meg, who said innocently, I thought it was poetry. Some of it is. Try this passage. There was a queer smile about Mr. Brooke's mouth as he opened at poor Mary's lament. Meg, obediently following the long grass blade which her new tutor used to point with, read slowly and timidly, unconsciously making poetry of the hard words by the soft intonation of her musical voice. Down the page went the green guide, and presently forgetting her listeners in the beauty of the sad scene, Meg read as if alone, giving a little touch of tragedy to the words of the unhappy queen. If she had seen the brown eyes then, she would have stopped short, but she never looked up, and the lesson was not spoiled for her. Very well indeed, said Mr. Brooke, as she paused, quite ignoring her many mistakes, and looking as if he did, indeed, love to teach. Miss Kate put up her glass, and having taken a survey of the little tableau before her, shut her sketchbook, saying with condescension, You have a nice accent, and in time will be a clever reader. I advise you to learn, for German is a valuable accomplishment to teachers. I must look after Grace. She's romping, and Miss Kate strolled away, adding to herself with a shrug, I didn't come to chaperone a governess, though she's young and pretty. What odd people these Yankees are. I am afraid Laurie will be quite spoiled among them. I forgot that English people rather turn up their noses at governesses, and don't treat them as we do, said Meg, looking after the retreating figure with an annoyed expression. Tutors also have rather a hard time of it, as I know to my sorrow. There's no place like America for us workers. Miss Margaret, and Mr. Brooke looked so contented and cheerful that Meg was ashamed to lament her heart a lot. I'm glad to leave it then. I don't like my work, but I get a good deal of satisfaction out of it. After all, so I won't complain. I only wish I liked teaching as you do. I think you would if you had Laurie for a pupil. I shall be very sorry to lose him next year, said Mr. Brooke, busily punching holes in the turf. Going to college, I suppose? Meg's lips asked that question, but her eyes added, and what becomes of you? Yes, it is high time he went, for he is ready, and as soon as he is off, I shall turn soldier. I am needed. I am glad of that, exclaimed Meg. I should think every young man would want to go, though it is hard for the mothers and sisters who stay at home, she added sorrowfully. I am neither, and very few friends to care whether I live or die, said Mr. Brooke, rather bitterly, as he absently put the dead rose in the hole he had made and covered it up like a little grave. John translates the poem of Schiller, because I made another episode earlier about Schiller, and Friedrich was probably inspired by Friedrich Schiller, because my guest in that episode, she talked about some of the plot lines in Schiller stories that we can find in Little Woman. I thought that was really interesting. Yeah.
Oh, that is interesting.
Yes.
The double meaning of Mr. Brooke, love to teach, that phrase right there.
But also, I think it's also Meg's pupils because they were not very nice. They were like,
right.
They were brats. If she would have had like nicer students, maybe she would like teaching more.
Yes.
I mean, you're a teacher, you know. They can be a handful.
Definitely the kids can make it or break it in many cases. So
Mr. Brooke, he only has one student, really. I used to teach art for kids, and they had so much energy when they're like 6 and 7. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I teach teenagers. They still have a lot of energy then.
Yeah.
So, and I see about 180 of them a day. So.
Yeah, I teach art for the 6 to 7-year-olds and then for adults. Quite big difference in the energy levels.
Yeah, that's a big difference.
Yeah. You need to pay attention to so many things at the same time.
You do, and there's a lot of decisions that you're having to make.
Yeah.
About things constantly. It's very exhausting. I have way more energy in the summertime than I do during the school year, just for that reason alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Meg's pupils were horrible. Like Joe had really easy with Kitty and Minnie. They were like ideal children. Really nice girls. Meg's pupils were horrible. I think that's why she doesn't like teaching.
Well, I can't really blame her in that case.
Laurie he wasn't great in the beginning, but then he turned out okay.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I think the worst part with Laurie was his moods and him being spoiled. Yeah, it's probably the biggest things that made him difficult sometimes. But otherwise, I mean, I think he was a very intelligent student, and I don't think he was necessarily hard to teach as long as he was in the right mood.
True. Yeah, in the uni, he kind of gets into wrong path. But Amy settles him in the end, which I always liked.
Oh, I was just going to say, Meg's students strike me as not only like very spoiled and kind of mean-hearted, but they also don't seem like the quickest learners either. So they just seem to be difficult all the way around. Laurie and his grandfather would care a great deal, and we should all be very sorry to have any harm happen to you, said Meg heartily. Thank you. That sounds pleasant, began Mr. Brooke, looking cheerful again, but before he could finish his speech, Ned, mounted on the old horse, came lumbering up to display his equestrian skill before the young ladies, and there was no more quiet that day. Don't you love to ride? Asked Grace of Amy as they stood resting after a race round the field with the others led by Ned. I dote upon it. My sister Meg used to ride when Papa was rich, but we don't keep any horses now except Ellen Tree, added Amy, laughing. Tell me about Ellen Tree. Is it a donkey? Asked Grace curiously. Why, you see, Joe is crazy about horses, and so am I. But we've only got an old side saddle and no horse. Out in our garden is an apple tree that has a nice low branch. So Joe put the saddle on it, fixed some reins on the part that turns up, and we bounce away on Ellen Tree whenever we like. How funny, laughed Grace. I have a pony at home and ride nearly every day in the park with Brett and Kate. It's very nice, for my friends go too, and the row is full of ladies and gentlemen. Dear, how charming! I hope I shall go abroad some day, but I'd rather go to Rome than the row, said Amy, who had not the remotest idea what the row was and wouldn't have asked for the world. Frank, sitting just behind the little girls, heard what they were saying and pushed his crutch away from him with an impatient gesture as he watched the active lads going through all sorts of comical gymnastics. Beth, who was collecting the scattered author cards, looked up and said in her shy yet friendly way, I'm afraid you are tired. Can I do anything for you? Talk to me, please. It's dull, sitting by myself, answered Frank, who had evidently been used to being made much of at home. If he had asked her to deliver a Latin oration, it would not have seemed a more impossible task to bashful Belle. But there was no place to run to, no Joe to hide behind now, and the poor boy looked so wistfully at her that she bravely resolved to try. What do you like to talk about? She asked, fumbling over the cards and dropping half as she tried to tie them up. Well, I like to hear about cricket and boating and hunting, said Frank, who had not yet learned to suit his amusements to his strength. My heart, what shall I do? I don't know anything about them, thought Beth. Forgetting the boy's misfortune in her flurry, she said, hoping to make him talk. I never saw any hunting, but I suppose you know all about it. I did once, but I can never hunt again, for I got hurt leaping a confounded 5-barred gate. So there are no more horses and hounds for me, said Frank with a sigh that made Beth hate herself for her innocent wonder. Your deer are much prettier than our ugly buffaloes, she said, turning to the prairies for help and feeling glad that she had read one of the boys' books in which Joe delighted. Buffaloes proved soothing and satisfactory, and in her eagerness to amuse another, Beth forgot herself and was quite unconscious of her sister's surprise and delight at the unusual spectacle of Beth talking away to one of the dreadful boys against whom she had begged protection. Bless her heart, she pities him so she is good to him, said Joe, beaming at her from the croquet ground. I always said she was a little saint, added Meg, as if there could be no further doubt of it. I haven't heard Frank laugh so much for ever so long, said Grace to Amy, as they sat discussing dolls and making tea sets out of acorn cups. My sister Beth is a very fastidious girl when she likes to be, said Amy, very well pleased at Beth's success. She meant fascinating, but as Grace didn't know the exact meaning of either word, fastidious sounded well and made a good impression. Amy and her words, and then her pretending to know what the row was instead of asking what it was, it always cracks me up.
Oh, she's cute, adorable.
She's just enough up in social circles and stuff to kind of know what's proper and all of those things that are expected of women. She just doesn't have all the same opportunities and training and stuff as Grace would have.
Ellentry. It's mentioned some years later in the chapter calls Joe and Amy when they are visiting the neighbors. At some point, Joe starts to tell a story about Amy riding on Ellentry, and Amy is so embarrassed. She's 19 at the time. No, 17 maybe, 16. Joe is 19, 20. Anyway, Amy is really embarrassed when Joe is telling that story.
But I forgot about that. Yes, that's the chapter I was referring to earlier. Joe embarrasses Amy so bad when they go pay calls that time.
So I think it's very impressive the way Louisa May Alcott writes about people in their different ages. Part of her transcendentalist training was to write a lot about her own inner experiences when she was a child. So I think that is something we see a lot in Little Woman. But also, as a reader, when you grow up reading Little Woman, you grow with the characters. I'm not a huge fan of J.K. Rowling right now. She did the same with Harry Potter books. Some writers really nail that very well.
Yes.
Especially when they write for kids and teens. And even in Little Men, I always like the part where it's mentioned that Fredrik had become better at speaking English when living in America for years. Little things like that I always enjoy in Little Woman series. An impromptu circus, fox and geese, and an amicable game of croquet finished the afternoon. At sunset, the tent was struck, hampers packed, Wickets pulled up, boats loaded, and the whole party floated down the river, singing at the tops of their voices, Ned getting sentimental, Walpole serenade with the pensive refrain, Alone, alone, ah, woe alone. And at the lines, we each are young, we each have a heart, or why should we stand thus coldly apart? He looked at Meg with such a lackadaisical expression that she laughed outright and spoiled his song. How can you be so cruel to me? He whispered under cover of the lively chorus. You've kept close to that starch-up Englishwoman all day, and now you snub me. I didn't mean to, but you looked so funny I really couldn't help it, replied Meg, passing over the first part of his reproach. For it was quite true that she had shunned him, remembering the Moffat party and the talk after it. Ned was offended and turned to Sally for consolation, saying to her rather pettishly, There isn't a bit of flirt in that girl, is there? Not a particle, but she's a dear, returned Sally, defending her friend even while confessing her shortcomings. She's not a stricken dear anyway, said Ned, trying to be witty and succeeding as well as very young gentlemen usually do. On the lawn, where it had gathered, the little party separated with cordial good nights and goodbyes for the Mons were going to Canada. As the four sisters went home through the garden, Miss Kate looked after them, saying without the patronizing tone in her voice, in spite of their demonstrative manners, American girls are very nice when one knows them. I quite agree with you, said Mr. Brooke. That was the chapter. The part of Meg not being flirty. I think when Amy travels to Europe, she wrote to Mommy a letter and she says that, Don't worry, Mommy, I'm not going to flirt around or something like that. It doesn't fit to the March family politics for girls to flirt.
Don't think it fits with Mommy's philosophy, the way she's raised her girls. I don't remember which chapter it is where she talks about, I have dreams about you guys, growing up and meeting and marrying good men, and all of that. And she talks about it in such a pure and innocent way without all of the, scheming and playing games and stuff that goes with flirting a lot of times.
That's true.
So I think they get that directly from Marmee because that's the way Marmee's chosen to raise them.
If I remember correctly, Sally actually ended up marrying Ned. But it wasn't a very happy marriage.
That's what I was just thinking.
I think it's the one where she buys the silk that Ned and Sally were having troubles in their marriage.
Yes, I don't remember exactly which chapter it was, but I do remember that. Yeah. It was a marriage of, what do they call it? A marriage of convenience. That's, they were both wealthy and in the same area. And so, it made sense, but it didn't actually really make either one of them happy.
Ned was pining for Meg, but I don't think they would have been a very good couple either.
Oh, no, I don't think they would have been. I think it takes Meg a while to kind of figure out what she wants because she's just so busy trying to fit in and cover up her poverty, and everything that she doesn't really seem to push back a lot of times, with the guys that flirt with her, including Ned. Obviously here she felt snubbed because of what he had said at the party, but in general, it takes her a long time, I think, to kind of figure out exactly what she wants in her love life. She just knows that she wants to be married and she wants to have kids.
Yeah.
And she wants to fit in.
I think it's the same with Jo. She's a bit indecisive sometimes. It's really in that chapter All Alone after Beth has died that Jo starts to revalue her life and her, what she wants from the future. Well, I think it makes a lot of sense for, any person to think about those things time to time.
Yes, exactly.
I was wondering, when you teach school, do you ever dress up in your historical costumes for school?
For Halloween, yes, I will dress up. At school, not so much, though. I've done it a few times for Halloween at school. But otherwise, I don't generally dress up. I teach social studies now, so I could actually because, it ties into history and all of that stuff. But I just haven't gone to the effort to do that. It's just one more thing to do in addition to everything else.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But yes, for Halloween, my sister and I usually try to do some sort of fun stuff together, like not just for school, but like we'll do some fun photos or something together, dress up for Halloween a lot of times in historically inspired costumes. So last year I did Pride and Prejudice Zombies. I don't know if you're familiar with that book or that movie. Fan fiction work off of Pride and Prejudice and set in a zombie world theme. And I typically don't like that kind of stuff. My husband does. And so he's the one that convinced me to watch it with him. And honestly, they stay really true to the Pride and Prejudice story. It's pretty amazing how well they stay true to, especially the story of Darcy and Lizzie. And so I did make a dress inspired by the book and the movie and did a little photo shoot for that for last Halloween. Have fun doing different stuff like that.
That sounds fun.
A lot of times Little Women stuff, I tend to do it more around Christmas though, because of the 1994 movie especially, people tend to think of it more as a Christmas kind of book and a Christmas kind of movie, I guess too, because the opening scene is set right around Christmas. And so I tend to do a lot more content with Little Women and costumes and stuff like that closer in November and December, not so much for Halloween.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who read Little Woman around Christmas. I can see why people would do that because, the book starts with Christmas.
Right.
Well, I can watch the 1994 film anytime. I grew up watching it. It's one of my favorites. Related to any season for me.
No, yeah. And I honestly never thought of it as a Christmas movie or a Christmas book or anything until people started saying that. And I started realizing a lot of people consider it. It fits all seasons.
Yeah.
But I will say, I do think, and you might actually know this, like you might have something that confirms this, but I just know from the book, I get the distinct idea that Alcott liked Christmas because she opens at Christmas. There's 2 other Christmases that occur in the first book. And every time it's Christmas, there's always some sort of like Christmas miracle or something good that happens at Christmas time. So I've always just thought, I think Alcott probably really liked Christmas herself too, given the way she sets it up in the book.
Yes, I have read a few times that she was a Christmas person. Nowadays, you have these people who start to prepare to Christmas already, like in the late summer. So I think she was like that, very enthusiastic about Christmas. We all have those special interests that we have. I love that.
Definitely.
So anyone who likes to connect Little Woman with Christmas is validated by this.
Yes,
Little
exactly. 100%.
Yes, it's nice. Oh, I saw on your Instagram the ice skating dress. I thought that was really nice.
Oh, yes. So I was inspired by chapter, 12, when, Laurie and Joe go ice skating and Amy, insists on trying to come along across the ice. And that was a fun outfit to research. That was another one that I used a skirt lifter on to keep the skirt out of the way while I was ice skating. And I didn't actually wear a crinoline underneath it while I was ice skating. I wore corded petticoat and a quilted petticoat underneath, which they would have worn quilted petticoats to keep warm. They would have worn that as the first petticoat layer. And corded petticoats would have been from the 1840s and, 1830s, the 1840s, and the first part of the 1850s before the crinoline was invented. There is some evidence that shows that corded petticoats were still worn some in the 1850s and 1860s, like not for going out or anything, but for more practical uses around the house, just to create still that bigger skirt shape without, the extra crinoline space that's taken up. But yes. And then the paletot was the jacket that I researched for that and created because I felt like that would give a little bit more freedom when you're skating on the ice as opposed to wearing something like a cloak. You have more freedom with your arms and your ability to catch yourself if you start to fall or anything. And then I actually had someone, I'm trying to remember her name right now, she has an Etsy shop, do an original hood and scarf for me from, I believe the pattern was originally in Godey's Ladies magazine. And so she took the original instructions for the magazine and created the hood and the scarf that I'm wearing. So,
Oh, that's nice.
yes, that was a lot of fun to create and to do. I actually have gone ice skating in it twice. I did it once for a photo shoot, and then I actually put together an event with our local customers group where we all went ice skating together in January. So we don't actually have like natural occurring ice here in Texas because it never gets cold enough long enough. But the last couple of years, it's become like this really big fad in the city area to set up ice skating rinks outside. And so there's several local cities that will set up an ice skating rink usually right around Thanksgiving, and then they'll keep it open until right after Christmas. And so we were able to take advantage of one of those. I will say outdoor ice skating rinks are a lot rougher than indoor ice skating rinks. And I had only done indoor ice skating rinks until the last few years when they started popping up with these outdoor ones here. And so it did take a minute to get used to the outdoor ice being just a little bit rougher than I was used to.
We used to play hockey in school, so I was always like, why can't we just ice skate around this ring like freely? Why do we have to play here? Yeah, I would have much preferred like just ice skate with my friends there around. But then we just have to play hockey here all the time.
Right. Well, and ice skating was another one of those sporting things that was, coming into vogue for women throughout the 19th century. Actually, there's some Regency outfits and Regency artwork showing Regency women ice skating. And there was, like stuff printed that was like, it's good for women to get out and breathe the cold bracing air, and it's good for your lungs, and it's, and so it was one of those things that was starting to be encouraged, to get out there and be active on the ice and get a little bit of exercise that way and fresh air and stuff.
It's funny how they started to recommend different sports to people around this time. Maybe it was because, like, I don't know, industrial revolution or people working inside more than outside.
I don't know. That is a good question that I don't have an answer for.
I feel like people are reliving their like childhood favorite books through these hobbies.
Oh, I 100% agree with that. I think that's 100% true. And I mean, if you go into the wider fandom outside of historical literature, into the Comic Cons and all of that, it's the same kind of thing. People are reliving their favorite.
If I watch the 1994 Little Woman or the 80s and Green Gables, I get feelings of nostalgia. All warm and fuzzy feelings. That plays a big part of it.
And it's the same thing with people that are into Jane Austen. So they all have their favorite movie version that they go to when they've had a bad day, or their favorite, novel or favorite part of the novel that they reread. It's definitely all plays into that escapism. And then, people ultimately build hobbies out of it. I wonder if anybody's done this with like the music Beth might have played at the time, but I was recently watching a video where someone's gone through and they're going through all of the music that the Austen family, I guess, had a collection of sheet music or something. And they put together, like, they call it the Jane Austen playlist. They have people like playing the pieces again. And, it's a whole playlist of the different music that was in the Austen family library. And I think it would be really cool. And maybe somebody out there has already done it. And I just haven't found it. If somebody went through and tried to like reconstruct like a Beth March playlist or something like that. Like, what are some of the pieces that Beth March might have been playing throughout the duration of the book, right?
Yeah. I have one friend who is an Amy fan, and she went through all the paintings that May Alcott admired and mentioned in her letters. So it's a bit similar to that, but I think in a way you take your fandom thing to another level when you do stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Some of us like the dresses and the fashion, and some people like the baking aspect of it, and some it's the music, and some it's the art. And so, it kind of coincides, I think, with whatever else you already like, because I was already really into sewing and fashion and everything. And then just combining that with my favorite literary works, So I think probably it's the same thing with some of these other people. They were already into baking, but they also love the literary work. So they combine these two things together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was nice to have you here. If you could tell the listeners where people can find you and follow.
Yes, so you can find me as Stitch and Addiction on pretty much everything. I have a website where you can look at my different designs that were inspired by Little Women, and everything is made to measure in about 10 to 12 weeks. So if you find something that you fall in love with, then you can order it, and it will take me about 12 weeks to get it made and sent to you. You can find me on Instagram as Stitch and Addiction, as well as Facebook as Stitch and Addiction. I also have a Pinterest and a YouTube that I'm not quite as active on, but I'm also on those platforms as Stitch and Addiction. So you can find me on all those platforms, and you're welcome to follow me. And of course, if you have questions, you can send me a message or emails or any of those ways. So I would love to chat with you about our favorite characters and our favorite books.
Awesome. So thank you so much for joining me. This was a lot of fun.
Yes, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's always fun to do like a deep dive into the fashion, because like I was real familiar with Joe's boating suit because I had recreated it. Some of the others, like I had to go down a rabbit hole a little bit, like the French print for Meg or something, to really kind of figure out, okay, what was it she was probably wearing here? Because I hadn't actually researched it before. So it's always fun to do that.
Well, I can hear from your voice that you are very excited about this topic.
Yes, and it's always fun to talk with somebody else who loves the same things that you love. So always great to talk with another Little Women fan, another Alcott fan.
Yes. And that's what I also like about these books, because they are so rich. And then you can, find stuff that sort of suits everyone. Everyone can have their favorite sister or their favorite male character. Everyone can find their favorite hobby from there, then like writing or painting or sewing, and it's just lovely. Yeah.
Yes, very nice to chat with you. Thank you, Niina.
Thank you. And we will keep talking on Instagram.
Yes, definitely. Keep in touch.
That was our discussion on Camp Lawrence. Thank you so much for listening. Take care and make good choices. Bye.